go. Top of my speech will be my rebuttals. First, the animal rights movement has used the strategy of rationality, and this has largely only worked on the progressive left who care about the animal impact. Joseph already preempts how on both sides, those who are radical will not follow either way. But those who can be swayed by culture and religion are a possible tipping point to remind them not to harm these animals. This strategy allows us to further penetrate the conservative right who do not listen to facts nor care about animal interests. And insofar as we don't have the full-blown solvency on this end, at the very least, there is an attempt that makes it so that this animal rights movement at least tries to penetrate those, right? Second, the reason why folklore and culture are an effective strategy is because it's bound up in religion and identity. Leader of opposition calls our case soft, but we call it strategic and tactical. This is not the only strategy we use, not the wording of the motion, but a tool in an arsenal. It also isn't binary. We can still use the rhetoric of the brain-eating amoeba and the welfare of animals. But if we also include rhetoric about religious sensitivity in the name of diversity, equity, and inclusion, then it becomes possibly successful. Third, note that leader of opposition has no positive case or solvency even though they keep calling us out on this. We question the lens of status quo and say that it is not enough and largely limiting. We as a movement can use both subjective and objective beliefs to forward our agenda to achieve the ends we want. Opposition has to give us an adequate defense of status quo and how on their side, the conservatives who do not believe animal welfare is important can be swayed on their side. And the reason that this is important is because Kuya Joseph already explained to you that these are the people that are not likely to listen to the objectivity of the current strategy. So the question here then is like, how effective is this strategy going to be? We explained to you that what this means and looks like for the movement is that for the right-leaning communities, the likely bigoted people with this kind of superstitions, are likely to still want to hunt those animals down, the ones that they see as bad luck, right? However, the way that we're going to penetrate the culture is on three premises. First, we understand that a lot of these cultures are going to hang on to their superstitions no matter what. But this doesn't mean that the animal rights movement shouldn't do something. Again, this is also a value judgment motion. So meaning their idea of urgency, we need to flip it back to the animal rights movement. What is the urgent place can we try to convince now? Are we still going to appeal to people we already convinced? Are we still going to appeal to rhetorics that already worked in the past but has not penetrated some of these communities? We need a tweak in our strategy because we need to understand that not everybody's going to feel the same. Again, framing. We are going to use this as part of a strategy, not the main one. This is not a prioritization debate. This is how we're going to be able to integrate this particular strategy. Second, no matter how advanced our advocacies are, the harms exist for these communities to perpetuate harmful actions toward animals. This is something that both sides agree on. But let us explain how does this evening out happen on our side of the house. First, religious groups are inherently isolationist. They live in pretty remote areas where people do not penetrate as much. So even if these people want to hunt down snakes, it's likely to be the ones that are going to be near their community and not outside of it. So when leader of opposition talks about this animal rights movement, having to convince them to not do any of these harms are actively mitigated because of these isolationist tendencies. Because we already explained as to how these religions are first unlikely to go to war with other communities because of religion being a protective attribute, because you don't really want to start another crusade just because you don't want to kill a particular animal. Look at India and Pakistan. Sure, there is a conflict, but there is still respect of one another when it comes to their particular religion. Second, they are likely to keep these harms in the worst case within their proximity. They are not likely to go out deep into the wilderness just to hunt down the snakes, even if it's going to be for their belief. Because we don't think that they are all crazy. We just think that they might want to still lean on to these particular beliefs. Because in status quo, people already understand why animal rights advocacy is important. These spaces are the ones that need penetrating. So how does this happen? First, we create a stimulus of discussion by including it in our advocacy. Kuya Joseph already explained to that. Social movements are there to remove stigma and bigoted ideals, meaning then that we have the moral justification to why social movements like the animal rights movement are likely to do this particular thing. Second, the direct reaction of the people is to look at the animal rights movement. It highlights the need for the movement and communities to use these superstitions. On the comparative, you don't have anything on opposition. They do not clearly mechanize how they even expand the animal rights movement. They talk about how we can still rely on this rationality. We can still rely on this objectivity because, the way at which we penetrate these communities are not urgent, but we tell you it is urgent because it's the one that needs the most attention. Third, we uniquely explain on our side that we're able to reduce harms by convincing some of these people about their superstitions. The effectiveness and solvency doesn't come in the full-blown co-option of these people, but the starting stimulus that makes them think about prioritizing social welfare. Leader of opposition completely misses the point of information. Kuya Joseph was talking about how the animal rights movement is likely to turn these peoples back to their cultural practices if those people are, maybe lost when it comes to their superstitions, because you can't tell them that, for example, somebody, like a religion doesn't want to eat chicken. Oh, wait, you can't eat chicken because it's going to harm the community. So what? Like, we love chicken. But if you tell them that, you can't eat this because you're not going to go to heaven or something like that, they're likelier to have a catharsis. We're not talking about people like them deeply religious people suddenly not doing something that they want, but like people with levels of superstitions that may have been left out to be put back into their minds, right? Again, this is not that this house would motion. There is a level of value judgment that the animal rights movement should do this because it is what is missing in their strategy. Objectivity will never work on people who may not have the same amount of rational faculties as an average person. The comparative is simple. We win both on the justifications and the mechanisms by which we are able to use this movement charitably without necessarily going into like a very, very impossible burden. Here.